Well, we've got a little shop work that we're working on today. Nate just got done doing a service on this 624 loader, and I thought I'd do a little walk around of it. We've had it just a little over a year now, a year and 1 week. We got this on the 16th of August last year. This was a used unit when we got it. It had just come off a 3-year lease. We got it from 5 Star Equipment. And when we bought it, it had 304 hours on it. Now, it has 2,501. So we just brought it in here for an oil change and a service, basically. Nate's gone around it with the grease gun. And he's just about ready to pull this out the door. This has been a real good loader for us. We haven't had any problems at all with it. We've got another one just about like it. It's the series behind it. It's a 624K. This is a K2. This has diesel exhaust fluid that we have to run into it. It's a tier 4 machine. Now, when we bought this loader, we ordered this kickbox bucket from AMI. I've done a video on this, done a couple of videos rather. It's got the back of the bucket pushed out right now, and the beauty with this bucket is you can get over the high side of a truck. You don't have to tip the bucket down into the box of the truck or the mixer wagon or what have you. You basically get the bottom of the bucket just a little off level, and then you can push the back of the bucket out. It dumps the material into whatever you're dumping into. Now, I didn't talk about this much, but this is actually the second bucket that we've had. The first one did not have this rubber edge here on it. And if you go back to the very first video I did on this bucket, you would have noticed that there was a, what was it? I think it was tight on this side, real tight. Yeah, this right side, it was real tight right here because the side of the bucket was warped. And on the left side here, it was warped the other way. We had a pretty good sized gap on this side. And what it would do is it would leak grain out through the back side of that backing plate, and it would leak it down into here on the other side of the platform, which was no big deal, but as you were traveling back to the commodity shed, it would be losing handfuls upon handfuls of grain. After a while, that adds up. So I reached out to the company and told them, you know, I'm not too happy with this because it's leaking. So they sent me this rubber edge here. It's segmented pieces just so that it can run the curvature of that back plate. So we put that on there, and I still wasn't happy. It still had enough of a gap because the metal was in the right spot here, and it was in the right spot back here. However, it gapped it in the center. The rubber would not compensate for the gap we had in the side of the bucket. So the reps from the company, they came out and they said, we're just going to build you a new bucket. I don't know what they did with the old one. We've had this one here for about a month now, maybe a little longer than that. And the other one, this one took a fair amount of time for them to build as well. We didn't get the first bucket until, I think it was just after the first of the year, sometime in January. So you got September, October, November, December, part of January. So 4.5 months. And this one took about the same time frame, but we didn't much care because we had the other one to use. This is a 7-yard bucket. The other bucket that we have is a rollout bucket. It tips more or less almost at the cutting edge. The whole bucket tips rather than the back pushing out. The beauty with this bucket is you have the full bucket and it cleans out every time. The other bucket has boxes in the bottom of the bucket that the cylinders sit in, and it gives you more of an area for the material to build up. And this one works awesome for plowing snow too. You don't have to worry about wet, sticky snow getting stuck in the bucket because that back pushes out every time. And you can be a little more accurate with dumping ingredients into the mixer wagon as well. So other than having that little hiccup with the sides of the bucket, this has been a real good unit here. So another project that we're working on is we have to replace the water pump on this truck 8, and there's a differential seal that we have to get into, and it looks like we've got some oil leaking out of the PTO. I'm pretty sure that's just a hose clamp. Nate tightened it up the other day, but I don't think he got it tight enough. So we're gonna drain the coolant out of this, and then we'll go over next door here. Sarge has got a project that he's just about done with. He ended up putting new brake shoes and new drums on this truck 12. He's getting ready to replace the shifter tower in it, and then he's going to pull it out the door here in a little while. He's actually doing a service to it as well. Now, a couple of videos ago, we had the old Freightliner doing some hot laps out in front of the shop here. This is what we have left to it. Jared cut this up here on Sunday. Today's Tuesday, and this is all that's left to it. The engine's real good in this truck, and what he wants to do is maybe put this engine in the Mack. He's got some issues going on with the head on the Mack. It's basically the same engine, 3406B, and he wants to go through the engine on the Mack and then eventually probably go through this engine here as well. Now, this Freightliner, he ended up having a rear end go in it. The rear went while he was hauling manure. It sat for quite a while. He screwed around with it. He swapped some parts out of this engine, put in the Mack engine to get that to run, to get that to get through third cutting here, and then he ended up ripping the cab off, cutting the back end apart, and then of course you've seen in that last video, spinning the tires out in front of the shop here. He ended up ruining the front drive axle as well, which he was kind of planning on having that self-destruct anyways. He was just running it for its last ride. So that's all that's left to the Freightliner, is what you see right here. Well, this is being somewhat of a mystery. So we've got the water pump right down in here. This is a gear-driven water pump, and there's a weep hole on the water pump so that if and when the bearing does go, there's the weep hole right there. If and when the bearing goes, it will weep coolant out of that weep hole, keeping the coolant from going into the base, the oil reservoir. What I have is I have a pressurizing kit here, and I am up to, I can't quite read it, but we're in the blue there. It's got to be 12, 13 pounds of pressure, because the red is 9 to 11. So I've got pressure built up on the system, and if it was going to leak out that weep hole, it should be leaking right now. Nothing's making its way to the floor. I'm half inclined to just replace the water pump anyways, because that was the general area it was leaking from, and it might not leak until the engine gets real hot. the engine hadn't been run. So we'll go ahead and start it. Maybe that will make a difference. But I don't want to change it, get all the coolant back in there, and then see that it was something else. So we'll let this run a second, and maybe the little gremlin will present itself. If I have to run it up to temperature, I'll do that, but I'd like to see it leak, to be honest with you. Well, we have pressure tested this. We have test driven it. We've got it up to 205 degrees. We gave her all what for, and I cannot get this thing to leak. Jason kind of diagnosed this last week. He was actually adjusting the brakes on it, and he's seen it weeping coolant. I wanted to test it to make sure we didn't have a goofy hose clamp or something. Nothing else is leaking here. Can't even get anything to leak. We're gonna go ahead and change this water pump anyways. This truck is a 2000. We did have the engine done on this, a year ago, 2 years ago maybe. We ended up replacing the oil cooler back last July. And we're kind of sitting still right at the moment. We do not need this thing to lay down while we're doing chopping corn silage. It's just one more problem, one more job to do while we're trying to chop corn. We already have the water pump, so rather than just throw this on the shelf and maybe possibly forget about it, we're going to go ahead and throw it on. The water pump was $605. The core is $716. So I might as well just put it on. Therefore, we can get the credit for the core, and it's just a little bit of an insurance policy. So we've got some parts to remove here so that we can get down in there. We'll start to pull that off, and we'll touch base with you guys in a little while here. Well, we've got everything off of here, ready to pull this water pump out, and we can start slapping the new one in. Nate has done a couple of oil changes. He's got this 13 shank chisel plow in here. We had a bearing go on the walking beams here towards the tail end of chisel plowing here this spring. They put new bearings in it. However, the walking beam, the bearing, when it went, it ended up taking out the part in the beam that the seal sits in. So we have a new walking beam here that we're going to go ahead and put in there. But what we're having trouble with is we can't get the old spindles out of the old walking beam. So I ended up buying this press a couple months ago, and we're going to try to utilize it to push them spindles out. What do you think? Do you have it figured out?
I think you got it.
You're waiting for me, huh? Okay. Well, we'll get it set up on there, and then we'll see if this 50-ton unit can push that out. We tried whacking on them with a hammer. They are hollow tubed here. We can push and get them to come out. Well, we're ready to press this out of there. We had to remove the hubs just so that it would work. That's the trouble with these damn presses. I guess that's why I haven't bought one up till now. Takes too much to set up. Give her the heat, whack it with a hammer. Right, Bob? Yeah. Got Nate standing in behind me. I don't know if I can get him to run the camera here or not. You want to run the camera? All right. I'm the only one with the proper safety fire on here. So, let's see here. I think we can go ahead. This is going to be the first thing that we've done with it. Getting up to 20 tons.
Is this dead?
No, as long as the red light's going. Oh, this thing, I'd rather have it right on the floor. But we really don't have that's not working so good. We're bending this plate right here. We're done bending her. That's not going so hot. How do you hold it? Huh? Sorry. We already made oh, you got it. Yeah, that's not going so good. We're going to have to heat it. Which side did you heat? This one or?
That side.
This side?
Yeah.
Here? Well, let's try flipping it over and we'll see if we can't push that one out. We might have to put the heat out. No, you can't cut this side up.
No.
We'll try to flip it anyway. We're getting all dirty here. Now, the one nice thing about this one, we can slide this press back and forth, get your work set up. Then you can just bring your press over into place here. Now we heated up this side first, tried whacking it out with a hammer. That didn't work. So we'll try this side. If this doesn't work, what we're going to have to do is maybe put it back on the machine, heat it up, and whack it with a hammer. Because we got, I didn't even look at that. We had 25 ton on there, or better. So it's kind of nice to have the gauge on there. Alright. My camera guy said this is not safe, so he shut me down. That's getting ready to pull off that plate. We've only got a little bit of surface here to put that on. And we are up to, we've got US tons. We're right at 20 tons right now. And that's not coming out of there. So I think what we're going to have to do is put that in the chisel plow and heat it up. Or another thing we can do too is we want to save this here for a spare. The other thing we could do is just buy 2 new spindles and put them in. And then that way we've got spindles already in there, because chances are you go to, you know, the other one wears out and we have this, we're not going to be able to get the other ones out anyways. So we've got to do some thinking here, but yeah. The press was doing its thing, but it's really not held all that well. And you can see that these pieces bent here. I do have some thicker metal that I could set on there. So we'll go ahead and release. And that's pulling itself up out of there. So we will join up with you in a few moments here once we figure out what we're going to be able to do with this. Well, we've got that out of there. It is sitting over here on the bench. We've just got to remove some parts off of it. The lower radiator hose tube here. Got to take that off. Got to take some plugs out of it. And that should about do it for what we need to swap over. And here is the weep hole right here, and that is wet. And it's full of dust and dirt, so it could just be that that was weeping out of there a little bit, and it probably would have waited until we were dead in the corn here. So it is what it is. So we'll go ahead and swap these parts over onto the new one and get this new one installed. Well, we've got this new water pump ready to go in there. All we really had to do was take the lower radiator hose tube off of there. We had to clean up a couple of gasket ports here. This one here, there's the one that comes down out of the thermostat housing, and then the one that goes on the back side of it that goes over into the oil cooler. So we'll go ahead and set this in there. And then what we're going to also do is we're going to put a new hose on going to the actual oil cooler itself. There's just a little short guy in here, and we'll kind of show you what that looks like once we get this setting into place. We put a new O-ring on the water pump as well, where the water pump sets inside this timing cover. Well, we just about have this job all wrapped up. Got the water pump in there. Not gonna lie to you, it gave me a little bit of a problem. Now all there is that holds the water pump in is two bolts. You got one right here, and then there's another one that comes down in through the timing cover down here. And what there is a race in there for the bearing that's on the very end of the water pump shaft. That sits into a race, and that bearing kind of supports the outer end of the actual water pump. That bearing wouldn't sit into that race. It wouldn't seat into it. And I had to take it off a couple times. I didn't want to just horse it in there and maybe crack the bearing or whatever. So I had to screw around with that a little bit to get that in there. Now we went ahead and replaced this silicone hose here. The only way you can replace this hose, if you blow this hose, the water pump pushes coolant to the oil cooler. The only way you can replace this is by removing this part of the housing here and this one. well, I guess you only have to remove the front part if you blow this hose after the fact. The hose usually outlasts the water pump, and it's just a good idea to replace this here now. So what we have left to do is we have to put the bracket on here that holds the alternator. So that had to be removed so that I could get these two bolts out to release this water pump. I've got to hook up the coolant tank hose as well, but I'll hook up that after the fact. Now, we didn't really find a leak. I had assumed that the water pump was weeping out the weep hole, which it very well could have been. That was moist, wet, had some debris in there. Another thing I noticed, and it was after I removed the lower radiator hose elbow, I noticed this gasket here, and this gasket wasn't sitting the way it's supposed to. You can kind of see the hole in the gasket there where it's supposed to be over this bolt hole here, and you can see the way the dirt is sitting in that gasket hole there. Now this gasket comes up against this tube. It's right here. It's this gasket, and it was on the back side, and that's kind of where we seen the coolant coming out of. Now this is the original water pump. The truck is 22 years old. Yeah, we just didn't need this come back to haunt us. Now, we've just got to get the coolant and whatever in there. I could have just threw a gasket on there and said, hey, let's try it. But it's just not worth the labor to have to go in and redo this job again. Now, I know you're probably wondering what the heck is going on with the pressure washer. So we're going to walk outside here. I'm going to do a little walk around to the Superliner. Jared's got that all cleaned up. Worked flawlessly hauling third cutting. We're due to get the 900 back here the end of the week here, so at some point. I'm a little behind with my videos because of the suspension that I had here, but we're slowly catching up, and yeah. So he's got the aluminum tanks all cleaned up. Had a guy offer us some money to buy this truck, and we're trying to make it worth a little more for him, but I don't think his offer's quite high enough. So, boy, that looks nice, don't it? Yeah. Huh? Boy, I had a digger today. Did I tell you about the digger I had today? No. Took a door out of the silo this morning. Climbed down out of the silo chute, and I went to crawl underneath the auger. Not really crawl underneath it, but I went to step underneath the auger, and it was raining. Left foot went underneath the auger, and I slipped a little bit, and I ran my head right into the lower supports on the auger, and I got a pretty good gash in the top of my head. It's been bleeding on and off all day. I got a nice little stain in the hat, but I don't have much hair, and if I had a little more hair on top of my head, that wouldn't hurt so much. But that's what happens with that. This job here is just about done. Water pump is all in place. We've got everything all hooked up. Better remove this punch or I won't have it anymore. Got coolant in there. All of that is set. I did crawl in underneath the truck to get ready to replace the rear pinion seal. However, it is not a pinion seal. It actually has the gasket around the actual differential itself is leaking, and I don't know if we can see in here or not. Oh, let me lay down in underneath here. On that far side of the differential, you see all the bolts going around it there. That is, usually you just put it together with silicone. And that, of course, is leaking. And we could go ahead and take that all apart and reseal it. However, it's not leaking that bad. And we're just going to leave it. We topped the differential off with oil. If we go ahead and fix the gasket now, or the sealing surface, we'll get it, tear it all apart, get it all back together, and then halfway through corn, they'll take the rear diff out of it. So we'll wait to seal that up. When the diff goes, maybe we can get a couple more years out of it. We've got to put an air dryer on it yet. Tim went and picked one of them up. We've got to put this on there, run the grease gun from one end to the other, and I got to see if this is ready for an oil change. So I was interrupted with a phone call. I thought it was a telemarketer, but it wasn't. So at any rate, we'll get the dryer on here, and then we've got to run a grease gun from one end to the other, and we'll have to see if this needs an oil change. I'm not sure if it does or not, but I'll have to look it up. One of the other projects that they're working on, they're putting new tires on the John Deere truck. All we do is use this truck in the dooryard here, moving feed. These tires that were on here were new. They weren't just takeoffs, and we wore them out just running around the driveway hauling feed every day. They were on there for like 2 years. I don't know how many miles. We're on them because the odometer doesn't work. And it is what it is. You might be asking, why are you putting new tires on it? Well, it's a pain in the butt to be putting used tires on all the time. And if something happens to this truck, we'll just take the tires off and reuse them. Most of the trucks that we have use a 24/5 tire anyhow, and they also need to replace the front left tire. It's got a bulge in it somewhere, so, and we again have to put a new tire on here because we don't have any used ones. So here, this one is bald. Are you seeing any wire? This one's got wire, I think. But we can recap these. The white Freightliners have 22.5s on them as well. And yeah. So outside here, we've got Nate Lilly. He's working on this noon spreader. The injector needed a new distribution box, so he's got that on there. All the injector hoses hook up to it. We got the pump on the front of the spreader. Hose comes off of that pipe there, comes down into this distribution box, distributes the manure to the injector. When we are not injecting, we take that hose off and we can put it on this spread plate here. If we don't want to monkey around with the injector, we can just unhook it, and we've got a spread plate that'll go on up on top there, and we can direct spread that way. But we usually don't top dress too much here, or just spread with the spread plate. So he's got some new hoses to put on, and he's having a bear of a time putting them on. He's got some new nipples here, and yeah. So we are going to get finished up with truck 8 here. What about putting them on? And well, no, yeah, put them on up there and push the hose on. Well, this job here is just about done. We've got the air dryer on there. Like I was saying earlier, that rear diff is just leaking around the seam a little bit. We're not going to worry about it right now. We're just going to keep an eye on it. Truck wasn't ready for an oil change yet. We did run the grease gun from one end to the other. The truck is just airing up now. We'll go ahead and take a peek at the water pump, make sure we're not leaking anything. I threw some black paint on there. Be nice to have some cat yellow. Everything looks good to go. They've got the tires on the John Deere truck, and they are just about done with this injector. Put the manifold on it, and he has went ahead and put a bunch of brand new hoses on here as well. This had the original hoses on there, and I think they went almost 3 years. And the injector hoses, that is. So that's gonna do it for this video. We've got to work on the 9410 tomorrow. So we'll catch you at the next one.